Good morning. We just want to welcome viewers to one of our first weatherization programs. It's a lab here at Blue Springs ReStore. Also 50% off today. Might want to join us. But actually Special Ed is going to show us some cost savings, some just do-it-yourself things for weatherization. We're really happy to have him here today. Thanks for joining us. We're going to let you just take the show over.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I woke up thinking about this actual weatherization class, and one of the things that was imposed on me is that we have to plan things, and so part of that planning is taking the time to write it down, what we're going to do, make a list of things that we're going to need, and then go back and go to the store that has the most cheapest, like the ReStore is a great place to get, and you might even pan around, show the store. There's lots of things to buy here, and I'll put just a few things that we'll talk about here on the table. And so as she's panning around, we'll give it a time so nobody gets dizzy. And for our viewing audience, we won't get dizzy. But as she's panning around, I'm going to take a moment, and one of the first things that we have to do in planning is we have to bring God into it. We can't do things alone. And so I'm going to ask, we'll open up in prayer, and so that way God will speak through me, not just these people, because people get bored with me sometimes. My wife does. So let's open up in prayer. Father God in heaven, I come to you now in your throne of grace. I pray, Lord, that you would be with all those that are viewing and be with this class. Father, I pray that you would let me speak about your praise and your glory and all that I say and do. Father, I do pray that you would take me out of the equation, and it would be you that speak through me today. I pray all this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Got the most important thing done, so now we can say we're started. All right, so I wrote some notes down just so I could stay on task. First thing you need to do is you need to plan out the whole project, not just the one thing that you're wanting to do. And some of the things that came to mind is, do you have all the best tools? Do you have all the right parts? And do you have a fallback plan if things don't go right? I bring this up because I had my daughter came over to the house, and she had a tire that shredded, so we went to go change a tire. Well, she didn't have a jack, she didn't have a lug wrench, and she had a flat tire. And I'm like, okay, what's the first thing you're gonna need? Well, you're gonna need a jack, so let's go get the jack. What else are we gonna need? And she's like, well, let's go get the jack. I'm like, no, let's write down what all we're gonna need. And so we're going to need a tire, which we can't do yet. So, but we'll get the tire jack, and or the lug wrench, and then we can sit down and say, okay, what else? What is our fallback plan? If something goes wrong, what are we going to do then? And so I told her some scenarios that could happen. We could break off a lug nut. We can break, any number of things could happen. The jack could slip. We need to be prepared. So let's put a chock in front of the wheel, so if the jack does fail, the car doesn't roll onto us. And let's get the tools. So we went and got the tools, and then as we were doing the things, I was showing her how to take the lug nut off. That has nothing to do with weatherization, but it gives you an idea about the thought process. We want to plan things out. And so I'm just going to hit the highlights of things that people talk about weatherization and what comes to mind. And not everybody thinks about weatherization the same way I do. And so I may bring something up that would be, that you would want to take notes in. So if you do, you can always pause the video. You guys up front, you can't pause the video. But you can pause the video, take notes. I'll get a piece of paper and pencil. And so with that said, one of the scriptures that came to mind was Ephesians 6:18. And I'm going to read that because I like to bring God into everything I do. And it says, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, being watchful to this end with all perseverance and supplication for all the saints. And so we pray first. We want to bring God into the mix because we can't do it alone. And if we bring God in, then we're not alone. We're a pair. And we're two or more together, God's in our midst. So we want to keep that in mind as well. And so that's why I brought the word in. That's one of the most important tools I'll keep in my tool bag. And I brought my tool bag this time because last visit I didn't have a tool bag, I had a backpack. And so I brought my tool bag today just to illustrate that. And I also keep all my notes. And so I try to plan things out. And one of the talking things that we want to mention about the ReStore is a great source to save money on buying the things that you would buy in the big box stores. And not that they are bad, but when you can save some money, that means you can do more with the project. You don't have to just stop it at the one project. You can actually buy, well, here's another project we can do. So I just wanted to bring up that we have the ReStore, and Habitat for Humanity is a great place to get teaching. You can volunteer and with our buildings, and you can actually get some education on the job site that will help you to see how maybe you can fix up your house. So speaking of weatherization, in 2 Timothy 4:2, it says, preach the word, be ready in season and out of season. I mention that because it talks about the seasons. You should always be prepared in the seasons. And so we're getting ready to come into winter, so we want to think about winter weatherization. But we don't want to stop there. We also want to think about, well, let's go ahead and do some pre-planting if you have some crops that you want to plant in the spring. So you want to have all that stuff ready on hand. So when you have a good day, because Missouri weather is unpredictable, that you can actually get some stuff done. And so, let's see. In Exodus 13:10 says to keep this ordinance in its season from year to year. So when you think about your weatherization, it's not just for this season; it's for the coming seasons. And so it's not just today or tomorrow or next week, but we're talking about a year round, and then another year, and then for years to come. So some of these things that I talk about will help you in the future years. According to Wikipedia, weatherization or weatherproofing is the practice of protecting a building and its interior from the elements, particularly from sunlight, precipitation, and wind, and of the modifying a building to reduce energy consumption and optimize energy efficiency. One of the things that came to mind is when we talk about weatherization, we want to see where, like for instance, we want to insulate our house because of cold weather, or even further in the summer we want to insulate so we can keep our cooling inside. And so one of the ways that one of the tools I use to help, which I didn't find here unfortunately, but is a little infrared thermometer. You can go and check your windows. So if you can see the difference, it's got a little laser point. I hope I didn't blind anybody. But it's got a weather, it detects the heat. So you can shine it on the windows and then shine it on your siding and you shine it on your roof, and you can see where you may be losing some heat, or you may be where it's colder during the hot time. Where it's colder, that's where you're losing your cooling. And so that's a little tool that I use to help me to evaluate some things that I can do to save money.
About how much do those run in the hardware store?
I think I paid like $27 for this one.
Okay.
I think, but I think I got mine through online. And
Okay.
so that's another. I mean, I'm not trying to take away from the ReStore, but you can also buy online. And today's COVID, pardon the mask, COVID ideas, you have things delivered, so you're not having to go out into these stores. And so
if anyone has one of those at home, they should donate it so then people can buy it from here,
exactly.
right?
There you go.
If you're not
Exactly.
using it, or if you upgrade, because
Right.
it has the newer models, it has nicer. This only just has the temperature. It doesn't have a really graphic, so you can't really see all the things where you're losing the energy. All right. So with that said, ways that, but not exclusive, the things that you can think about in weatherization: gutters. Cleaning out so the water doesn't collect. People they don't think about this, but you clean out your gutters because if the leaves are in the gutters, they hold the moisture, and the moisture sits and then it collects, and then when it comes wintertime, the snow has something to hang on to, and then next thing you know is you have the gutters falling off because it's just full of water, or it's pouring over the side and the gutters are not effective. So you want to think about what in weatherization. Now that we're in that mindset, let's clean up the gutters and maybe even put some of the and I think I'm not sure if I saw it here, but or at the other store, but they had this device that you put underneath the shingle that covers the gutter that only allows the water to go into the gutter and not the leaves. So there's another thing that you can think about. This also prevents the buildup of ice, because if you have the moisture in the leaves, then they turns to ice when it gets cold out. That makes ice heavier than water itself, and so it will actually pull your guttering away from your house. Windows. People think about the windows. They don't think about all there is to be on the windows. You have the outside of the edge of the windows. You have trim, and that trim, if it's got any the paint peeling, then the wood is exposed. The moisture gets into the wood, and it will also cause it to swell when it freezes. causes more paint to peel, which will actually cause the window seal to actually erode away. And so that's another thing about think about windows. Screens and to glass. Most windows have a screen and then they have a glass, a storm window they call it. Okay. During this season, when it's getting ready to be winter, we wanted to bring the glass down because we're not going to have the cool air coming in, and let's put the screens back up. So it's just another thought of weatherization. Caulking. When you're doing this, you look at the inside, see if you have any mold buildup. You want to clean that out. See if you have any water or air coming through that you can use caulking. They do have caulking here, and so gravity tube just as a little illustration. You want to use a silicone base that's designed for exterior if you're doing it outside. If you're doing it inside along the wood of the inside where maybe moisture is collected and maybe cause it to pull away, you want to do a silicone that's interior for that setup. Look for cracks and painting the trimming, glazing. Some windows have glazing and some you'll see the chocolate kind of separated or broken. You want to re-glaze those windows because that's where air will exchange and you're losing the cool air from the summer and you're losing the heat during the winter. You want to use foam to fill in gaps. If you have any gaps in the windows, I've brought a couple of illustrations of I found it here. I brought it here. I didn't find it here. But they have this is foam tape that you put around the doors, around the windows, and if you have big cracks, they even have the tube stuff that you can stuff in with a putty knife, and to help fill those cracks. And then you can also fill or silicone over that so that you have a water barrier. Am I going too fast? I think
that's perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that help with like mice and stuff too?
It does help with mice. If you go along the doors, they have a stripping, and I looked for some here, and I didn't see it here, but they have a little plastic piece that will actually adjust so that you can put it on the bottom of your doors and allow not just mice, but also any outside insects, ants, roaches, that kind of things from coming in. So that's another thing to think about weatherization. It's not just about the weather, but it's about preventing things from coming in or getting out. That temperature is the one thing. Doors, you're using weather strips and seals. Something else people don't think about is plants. Some plants don't do well in the winter, so if those plants, you want to take them out, put them in a pot. They do have pots here. I forgot to grab one. But you want to put them in, bring them inside during the winter so that they're not getting killed by the cold. They also have something that just came to mind. I found a sprinkler. People during the winter, they don't think about the sprinklers. Well, sprinklers usually have something attached to them that has water attached to it, and that will, if you don't drain it, it will actually cause it the ice to build and cause it to expand and then fail. And when you go to turn it on in the spring, you'll have water not coming out here, but in your yard. And so you want to keep that in mind, is to drain your if you have the sprinklers, and if you don't, if this is one you can take in and out, pull those in so that they're not freezing and you're not wasting money having to replace these next year because you left it out all the winter long. You also have cover your plants that you can mulch. Will actually protect the roots. If they are outside, you can still put some mulch around the root ball to insulate and also to hold moisture so that they're not, that's what it's designed for, is to hold moisture and not let weeds come through. And then pruning. When some flowers and plants, like my wife's roses, after they've done their thing, they pull all the juices back inside, the nutrients. Well, you want to clip that back so that you have new growth next year, because next year it may be a dead side, and now you've got that in the way of new growth to come in. Speaking of watering, and you have water spigots. They have water spigots, and I didn't see any here, but they're weatherized that will allow the water to drain out after it's been turned off. My house is kind of weird because I have two shutoffs inside the house that shuts the spigot off. But make sure you, when you shut them off inside, that you go out and let the water out so it's not just standing there, because that is what, when it freezes, it will expand, and that's when people have burst pipes because their spigot was left on, or water to the spigot, and it got cold, and that ice traveled into the house and then expanded and caused the failure. Make sure you drain them, and Some are designed for the weather, so you want to look at them. If the ones that are designed has a little cap on top as well as the turn, and then you have the actual opening where the water comes out. If they have that cap, it's designed, it won't let the water just sit there. It'll actually drain off. And so it's a cool device to have. Speaking of water heaters, something people don't think about is water heaters collects rust. What I mean with collects rust is that it actually waters inside there, and there's little holes inside there that will rust, and it will flake off and go to the bottom of your water heater. Well, that's where your element is. And when your element that it heats the water is covered with rust, then the water's not getting the heat, so your hot water heater is having to work harder to give you the hot water that you're wanting. So once a year, I do it in the fall. You go down and there's a little spigot on the side of your water heater. Just take it, run it off, and if you have make sure if you have a drain, that you have a hose going to a drain, or take it outside. You don't want to fill your basement up with just trying to get rid of rust, because that causes more problems. But you want to run it for about a couple of minutes and watch the water. You'll see the rust come out. You may even see some calcium, which is a whiter color flakes. Some calcium builds up by relieving that, letting it, because all that stuff, gravity pulls it down. The spigot's at the bottom. You're letting all that out. When you see it running clear, go ahead and shut it back off, and then you're good. Also, you want to, during the winter, you also want to check the flue. Make sure you have nothing is blocking the top of it, because the heat will cause carbon monoxide, and you don't want that to be built up inside your house. So you make sure the flue's unclean. There's no cobwebs built up, and all the boogies stuck to it, not letting the airflow go through. You want to check that. And I do it. I get a point.
Where do you find the flue?
The flue is on top of the water heater, and so usually you'll see a ductwork going up and maybe to the outside. You want to make sure none of it's rusting, falling down, or kinked or pinched or whatever. My basement, I have all sorts of stuff in the rafters, tucked up, and I found it where one of the pipes had fallen and kind of bent that flue, so I fixed that.
So carbon monoxide could get released, so it sounds like having a carbon monoxide sensor as an alarm.
A lot of people have the carbon monoxide and a water temp or water gauge, where actually when there's water present in your basement, it'll sound an alert as well. So they have more than just the carbon monoxide. Good point, thank you. See, that's why I wanted Thomas here, because he's my back, I can sound things off. And for those who are watching who know Thomas, he was given, he's not here today because he was being tested for COVID. He got exposed, and his test came out negative. So we just got the news just before we started. And so that's praise God for that. And speaking of flues, we have the fireplaces. Some people have fireplaces. You want to make sure you check your flues, make sure they're open if you're going to make a fire. You don't want all that smoke coming in your house. And you also want to, some fireplaces, you burn, they have a log that you can get at the stores that you can burn, and it'll burn off all the silt that's inside the buildup inside the fireplaces. A lot of house fires start because people don't clean out those flues. They don't clean out the soot, and that once it gets a good roaring fire or spark will ignite that soot, and then you have a fire inside the wall and you don't even see it, and then the heat is what causes the rest of the house to catch fire. And so just another something to keep in mind when you're doing the weatherization. You also want to clean out the cobwebs that you can see with one of those little dusters. Also check your flue if it's open or closed. You want it closed if you're not going to use it, because that will allow the hot air, if you're heating your house, to go up the chimney instead of heating your house. So you want to close that if you're not using a fireplace. If you're going to use a fireplace, then open it to allow because the hot air will rise. We were talking about painting. I brought some from the store. I found they have brand new stuff that was donated, still in the packaging.
So we actually have a limited number of items that we purchase. So if you see anything that's got a white tag like this, I'm Lindsay Brown, Community Engagement Manager. We have a limited number of items that we actually purchase and then sell because they're things that people really like to use, like paintbrushes and doorknobs.
That's something I did not know. Thank you, Lindsay. They also have Grace. When you're painting, you take the excess paint off, and also keep your brushes clean so if you get any nasty gunky stuff. If you notice, it's above the paint, so when you take it off, it won't get into the. It will keep the nasties from getting back into your paint, so it doesn't look nasty. And I also got these trays were from here, and they also have the metal ones that these go into. These are liners, so keep your. So if you don't paint a lot, you don't want to have to clean the pan every time. You can buy a bunch of liners and just do it for the different color paints that you're going to use, so you're not having to clean in between every time you paint. One of the things I did find here, and this is it's got the orange tag, so this is a donated item. Paint rollers, they have those here, and I didn't see any of the covers, but come in, they get it all the time. And something I thought was kind of interesting is they had paint sticks here. Can't tell you how many times I've had to find a big spoon or something to do when because I didn't have my paint stick. I did get this from here. This is an exterior paint. I'll hold it up for the outside. This is an exterior paint. It's a Rhino Clear. It's high sheen satin, but this is will help when you're talking about painting the window seals and painting the trim. You want to have a high gloss because that will allow the water to drain off and not just sit. Because if you have water sitting, believe it or not, when it rains, it's not just pure water. It's actually dust particles that are up in the clouds catch and condensate and turn into the raindrops. So when the raindrop hits, it's bringing that dust out of the sky back to your. That's why your car gets dirty right after you wash it, or after a rain. You'll see that dust is just collected all over the wheels. This helps keep that flowing, so it's not just sitting there, because that's what causes the paint to defect. Water sitting on that dust particle stuff. So an exterior paint for the exterior, and of course you get an interior paint for the interior. Go back to the notes. One of the notes about painting, you want to make sure you do paint. People don't think, well, I'll let it go. The longer you let something wood exposed go, the more it has for the ice to build up and cause it to spread, and will cause it to peel and cause more problems right down the road. So you want to seal up any exposed wood. You want to paint over it, or if it's a crack, you want to use the caulking as we talked about earlier, because ice does destroy. Speaking of ice and destroying your foundation, you want to do a walk around your house. You want to see if you have any cracks exposed from the outside, so that you can fill them with. They have a concrete sealer that you can actually put into the cracks, because again, any crack moisture will get into, ice will build, and cause it to make it worse and worse and worse over time. So we want to limit that as best we can. When you go to the inside, you'll want to look at your foundation where the walls meet the floors, that cracks. There's some cracks underneath the windows. You want to fill those in, because that's where moisture is coming in from the outside. If you seal it from the inside and outside, then your house is better protected. You also want to get rid of the debris. The leaves build up, limbs fall. People just leave them against that. If you have any type of debris of leaves and stuff like this, it will allow the moisture to set on the edge of your house. So you want to pull that stuff away from the house. Ground is okay. I mean, that's what it's there for. But you don't want to have the debris, is what I call it, the leaves and the twigs and the acorn nuts and the walnuts and all that stuff. It builds up over time and actually will trap moisture and actually cause problems with ice, because moisture turns to ice. We talked about sprinklers, draining them and removing the heads. If some of the sprinklers have heads that can come out, you want to take them out so they're not exposed to the elements, because that will break with ice over time. Some things that that covers most of the things that I'm thinking about weatherization, but some of the things we were talking about, tools that you'll need to do this kind of work. The prep work, shovels, cement, a flashlight sometimes, and batteries. And the prep work is not just for the now doing the project you're doing, but also for when the power goes off. That's what the flashlight and the batteries are for. You want to have that kind of stuff on hand. Also mentioned, or you mentioned the detectors, the smoke detectors, carbon monoxide, also water. Check the batteries. Do it twice a year. Do it at the fall. Do it in the spring, so that you get the full coverage of the spring, summer. The fall covers the fall and winter. And so check those detectors because it will save lives. You also have test them because most of them do have a little test point. You want to test them, make sure they are functioning. And just putting a battery in doesn't mean it works. You should actually test it. Talking about weatherization and prepping, people don't think about their cars. You know, you change your oil, you know, when it goes into the winter because you want the thinner oil so it doesn't keep your engine from not starting. In the summer you want the thicker oil because heat will dissipate easier through the thicker oil. Okay, but we don't think about the air filters. And so I saw an air filter here on the shelf, and I was like, that would be a great visual aid to remind me. Check your vehicles, check the fluid levels, check your oil, check your filters. Some cars have two filters. You have one inside the engine compartment and one inside the cabin, they called it. And usually you find them behind like a glove box. But they have the inside cabin filter, which keeps all the stuff that the air circulation, the leaves and the dust and all that. It keeps it from coming into your car when you're running just the fan. And so it's a good thing to check that as well. And this is one of those inside cabin filters. And so I brought that to pick that up to remind you. Talking about cars, you have gas. During the winter, you want to put a gas treatment. You know, heat will actually keep the moisture out of your gas, which moisture freezes and causes problems when you try to start a car if you have an older vehicle. But the gas that you have to put in your lawnmower, you want to make sure you put some type of heat in it so that it too will condensate and have moisture inside. And then next thing you know is you're pouring the gas into your lawnmower and your lawnmower's not starting well. That's because you have water in your gas. And so, you know, I try to, when it comes to wintertime, I try to make sure I use all my gas up so that I have an empty container because if it's water, it won't condensate and I won't have to worry about water in it. And when I go to fill it up, I always make sure I pour everything out to make sure the water that did condensate is not being poured back into the gas. And so something to keep in mind to not treat just your car, but also your lawnmower gas, or some people have chainsaws and they have, or even gas-powered weed eaters and trimmers. So check your gas. How am I doing on time?
Good. You got as much more time as you want, but we don't have to run, you know.
This is a commercial break for ReStore of Blue Springs. Do you guys have any questions? I gave you a whole bunch of information. Do you guys have any questions yet?
So,
On my back door, what do you put on the sides? I gotta do that sweep thing, but the sides, our front door
is
had
it pedestrian
metal
door
and it,
or big up and down?
Some of them have a metal strip with
yeah,
like
and
a
that
kind of
got all
felt.
tangled up and
Right.
just yanked that off.
You can pull that out. This is a adhesive that doesn't have the metal part. And it has a sticky on the backside and then the foam on the inside.
And that'll work on the door that
It'll
you
work on the
use
door.
all the time?
You want to clean it first, make sure there's nothing, dirt or debris, because what will happen is if you don't clean it and you put it up against, you put it onto a dirty spot, over time it will pull away. And so that's how the metal stuff is. Just a little bit of friction will cause it to pull away. And if you don't maintain it, then it just gets worse and worse and worse. Every spring or summer, or spring or fall, I always go and try to make sure that all that's done, because in the spring I'm getting to turn the AC on soon, and so I want that, make sure I have a good closure. And again, this can go inside the door jamb where the door hinges. You can put it on the door, or you can put it on the actual frame. I prefer the frame because I don't want to cause any issues with the door's hinge. And if you might even do it with the door closed. Some people put it on the inside so that the door closes up to it. And so people do weatherization differently. And you can always ask, some of the church member or family member who's kind of in the know of buildings and stuff, what would they recommend. Me, I go cheap, so I bought this. In fact, I bought a whole bunch of it, so I have this at the house, and I'm still using it because it doesn't fail in 1 year. I mean, it takes a couple of years for it to fail. And sometimes over time, cracks do present themselves. Wood peel, or the wood changes with swelling and shrinking during heat and cold. So gaps will form, and sometimes you can buy this stuff. if it's just a smaller crack, I can actually cut this in half and pinch it in better. But I buy the big stuff, so if I'm doing any remodeling, if I'm pulling out the old caulk, because some people use acrylic caulk, and over time those crack, and so I'll pull that old stuff out and I'll put in silicone myself. But when I pull that old caulk out, I'll find that there's a gap between, and so I'll fill that gap with this. And this is, I think it's pretty cheap. It's like $15 for a big roll, and it's taken me 7 years to go through the one. And I've done several houses, so I still have this much left. I'm good for this one.
Hey, I'm $50. Here.
Is there any other questions?
What about for like a wood deck or a wood fence? What should I paint on it or anything to
Very
protect that?
good. For exterior decking, and for like some people have porches, they're exposed. There's no covering. They're all exposed to the elements. Two things I would recommend. First, a good power washing to get rid of the old stuff out, but let set a day to dry before putting on any type of stain. Some wood will change colors over time, and so you can use a stain. They also have Thompson water seal, which actually has stain built in, 2-in-1, which works really well. But you do, after whatever you got the wood back to what you want it to look like, you would use I've been through chemo, so there's moments when my brain says,
What is that word again?
the Thompson water seal. You can actually buy a seal. Now, there's different ways you can apply it. You can apply it with, some people like to use it with a paintbrush. Some people like to use it with like a spray, mechanical spray, or electrical spray. I did see one back there, and I didn't want to bring it up because there's only one, and somebody may want to buy it. And so, but you have the sprayers that you can use, and you can also buy one of those pump sprayers that you would do for weeding and stuff like that, and you can apply it with that. And you put it on there liberally, and so that will cover. You don't want to have any exposed wood left untreated. You want to treat all surfaces, so that way you don't. Some people they forget about it right there when you walk out of the house, and that's when you have the most foot traffic, and that's where the most of the stain will come off, or the sealant will come off there because the foot traffic causes it to break away. So you definitely want to do that around those doors. You maybe a second coat around some of the high traffic areas, steps and so forth. But that's a great question because I didn't have that in my notes about decks and doors.
How many years is typical between needing to do treatments like that? It just depends on the weather.
Most sealants is a 5 to 7 years. Most sealants do. But some people, when they put new decks down, they will change rapidly because the elements that will cause the wood to change color. So you'll do it maybe at the 2-year mark for a new deck. 2 years later, you want to reapply. But for the most decks that are seasoned, 3 to 5 years is what I would go by. Some of the better high quality sealers give a 10-year. I haven't seen any go for a full 10 year, except the areas that wasn't foot traffic. But